welcome back to the Drop Point. We're here with Justin Unger and Brian Freeth of 1075 Consulting. And today we have joining us Jim Stein. He is going to bring a wealth of experience to the propane industry. So over the years, he's worn a lot of different hats. He's seen firsthand how this business continues to evolve. And he has a perspective that really shows what makes propane such a unique and rewarding career path. So we're going to dig into his story, and we're excited to see his insights and to see what keeps him passionate about the work that he does every day. So welcome, Jim. It's nice to have you.
Thank you.
Hey, Jim, appreciate you making time today. The first thing we're going to dig into a little bit is your career background and maybe some industry changes. So you started in the industry a couple of years ago, and you've had a bunch of different hats, as Jackie mentioned, along the way. Through your progression, you've kind of ended up as the HR manager and now at LP Gas Jobs. Looking back, how has the industry changed from when you started to where you see it today?
Yeah. So, when I started back in 1980 with CalGas, it was a very strong workforce. I started as a bobtail driver and did that for a year or so, and then got into service, did that for a couple of years, and then the company had a management training program. And so I got into the management training program. So I first took a plant, did that for a couple of years, and then went to another district. So, the progression was pretty quick, really. During the time I was a manager, I went to school and got a degree and what have you. And then I got into the jar role. So much has changed over, I guess, maybe that first 20 years, whether it's a technology thing from, physical assets, uptails, was trucks, tank monitoring, a lot of that stuff just didn't, some of the latter stuff, tank monitoring, the software that is out there today just didn't exist, So it's amazing how much has changed. So is that helpful a little bit?
Yep. So what, can you be a little more specific maybe in some of the changes that you've seen maybe on the industry side, and then we'll move into HR side here in a little bit?
Yeah. So, the changes from 30 years ago, it was not that difficult to recruit and hire people. You put out an ad and you'd get 20, 30 resumes. And that was a pretty easy process to go through. And the selection process, it wasn't not that difficult. Today, it's just changed drastically as far as just the degree of difficulty goes. Just the longevity was back in the, 80s and 90s was the norm. People would stick around for, 15, 20 years, even longer. When you hired somebody, there was just this excitement of growth and a future, and it was like contagious, really. And that in itself was just really what motivated so many of us, and how so many of us have grown through the industry. In the last, 5 or 7 years, it's just changed drastically from the pre-pandemic, area, what have you. It's just gotten much tougher. And so we work hard every single day to help fulfill and find those needs for the companies that utilize our service. So is that kind of a little bit, maybe, Brian?
Yeah, listen, Jim, it's whatever your response is. Like, we're not looking for anything specific. Like, if that's the response to the question, totally fine. Like, this is just a conversation, right? So that may lead me into a different question. Like, so what motivated you to start LP Gas Jobs?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I was the HR manager for AmeriGas, I went through the old management training program through CalGas, and I saw a need for management training. There was we never really had a bench. So I took that program and started it. And it was really kind of the hallmark of because I wasn't really a benefits and compensation, and that wasn't really my expertise. It was more on the management training side and identifying people that had the skills, the talent, the background, and the desire really to grow and express themselves. So that was just a huge part of what got me motivated. And then I realized that there really wasn't there wasn't any resource for our industry. I mean, so this is going back almost 20 years ago. So to do a search you could find job boards for other industries, construction, plumbing, HVAC, what have you, but not propane, not specific to that. So that's really where I got motivated to separate myself after 25 years with AmeriGas and strike out on my own. And so that's what kind of drove that.
Okay, so it was just a change in the industry and the fact that there wasn't a uniform location that you could go to find resources, try to find drivers or at least driver candidates. Again, we started. I didn't start in the 90s or in the 80s. I started in the 90s, but the career path has been pretty similar.
Yeah.
And going through the management side and learning to try to recruit and identify, that became such a big part of the job. And I know that
Mm-hmm.
even independents today, they struggle to find the time to go out and actually effectively recruit and train and hire. So that's kind of going to lead me into my next section. So let's talk about the hiring requirements and expectations. When propane companies are hiring today, what should their expectations be? Should they be looking for somebody that has experience and training and certifications, or should they try to hire somebody that they can train to fit their business model?
Well, it's a great question, and it comes up practically daily, when a company reaches out and, expresses an interest in whether it's a bobtail driver, a gas service tech, or getting into the management side. Too frequently, they're looking for somebody to hit the ground running, okay, which is fine. And that's okay. I think that there's sometimes a reluctance to look outside the industry and recognize that there's a lot of talent out there. And I've said this 1,000 times. Hey, we all had to start somewhere. Trying to, not convince them, but to help motivate them to also look outside the industry and within. And so that's one of the challenges that we find is because, looking to the outside, you're obviously going to have to invest in training. Mm-hmm. And that's a big portion of what drives this industry is having well-trained personnel, whether it's the entry level. I don't like to really call it entry level, but it's the bobtail driver. It's the heartbeat of our industry. That and the service tech side, if they're willing to invest that little and it's a commitment, okay? Training is a commitment, but always getting pigeonholed into just finding somebody from within does limit those that seem reluctant to do that.
Okay, thank you. So from your perspective, what are some of the most common mistakes that propane companies make when they're trying to hire somebody?
Yeah, it's a good question. Probably one of the biggest ones is it taking way too long to actually hire somebody. I mean, okay. We'll send folks over to the respective company, and we've already communicated with these individuals. They're excited. And then there's this lag time, I'll get emails back, occasionally just saying, hey, I'm looking forward to getting contacted by such and such. And there's this lag time. And if a company waits too long, that person has moved on. And so that is a big thing, is just taking too long. Communication and feedback is just another thing there's an etiquette thing with that. If somebody has applied and you perhaps if the company has reached out to them and they, for whatever reason, were not a good fit, let them know. A simple let them know that we're of course going through the process and appreciate your interest and what have you. We will get back with you if we decide to go any further. That doesn't happen that often. I just hear way too often where, they called me, but I just never heard back from them. And it's frustrating for the applicant, for the employee that's applying for the job. And it's also a reflection on the company itself. So I think those are a couple of things that kind of stick out.
So I just want to follow up on that. Are there tips or methods that a hiring manager could use to maybe have a better scheduling process or to make the time available to follow up on these candidates in a more timely manner?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, on our site, I have tips for employers and tips for employees, because employees can learn a lot too. They've got their own responsibilities of what I call kind of just good, solid, common sense etiquette, you know? So, but yeah, there's sometimes it's just, common courtesy from both sides. There's oftentimes when we will talk to a respective candidate and they at first don't seem interested at all. And then when they know who it is, then all of a sudden there's this spark of interest,
Right.
So I always tell people the best thing you can do is always feel like the person that's calling you is your best friend or somebody. And then if it happens to be something of less, you can, but yeah, there's, and from a employer's standpoint, they can express that enthusiasm and ask questions about growth and what are they looking for in a particular job or this particular job, and what didn't they like about their last job. And so there's a lot of probing questions that employers can engage in that certainly helps through the process of, for the most part, determining, is this person the right candidate? It's always kind of a crapshoot, when
Yep.
because you don't know. And one of the most important aspects is that cohesive teamwork that this individual is going to bring to your respective team. So there's so much that can be conveyed through a conversation that sometimes is probably lacking.
Okay. So, just to follow up on that real quick. So you're talking about common courtesy. To me, that's please and thank you, right? Those words still mean something, and they still go a long way in stimulating a conversation, or at least being able to get somebody that's receptive to what it is you're trying to say. So to your point, following up in a timely fashion, effectively communicating with the customer or with the potential candidate, excuse me. Those are just those are significantly important pieces of the whole conversation. So, what are some of the qualities that you have found that has made somebody a successful employee in the industry?
Yeah. So I think just the expression of a desire to work for this company, enthusiasm, attitude, employee, teamwork that sometimes that has to be fostered from management typically. So for somebody to be a success, it's a lot of times it's maybe not going to come natural unless there's some nurturing of employee mentorship and getting the other employees engaged in a not just a respectful way, but a welcoming way that makes this person really excited to come to.
So, again, just to follow up on that, so would you recommend that if you have a person that you are considering hiring, would you introduce that person to the team prior to extending an offer?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Some companies do a really great job of that process, and others fall short. And I think one area is to hit just on that. Even if it's just letting those, they're not going to be involved in the hiring process, but they can certainly weigh in. Not only did you introduce this person to the team, but get their feedback. Hey, everybody is going to pick up on something
Right.
that's going to add benefit to the ultimate decision when an offer is made. So yeah, I think that's a great step, and some companies do that. They just have a regular process of, and it may not be everybody, but you'll bring in a couple of drivers, a service tech, you got your customer service personnel. So yeah, I think that's a great strategy practice to make happen.
Okay, good. I appreciate that. So that's the first couple of sections that we have. Now I'm going to flip it over. Justin's going to ask some questions, and then I'll sort of circle back towards the end. And if I have anything that I think we should follow up on, I'll jump in there.
All right, Jim. So,
Justin, it's all you.
all right, man. Thank you. All right, man. So I got, how about like some recruiting strategies? So how can smaller propane businesses compete with larger companies when it comes to recruiting talent?
Well, So that's a good question. You know, in the last probably 10 years, the independents, the smaller mom and pops, what have you, have actually fared very well. Their turnover is far less than the larger companies because they've kind of maintained that local community involvement presence. And there's a lot of bigger companies that still are, very involved community wise. Being that local, though, is really a big benefit uh, to folks looking for a job, where sometimes they see the bigger companies as just that. They're bigger companies and what have you. On the flip side, the bigger companies have multiple locations, and many times somebody will say, hey, I'd like to come on board because I do know that you have this plant somewhere else. So that's a big advantage that the larger companies do have. But the smaller companies, over the last really 15, 20 years, I know this, they've really upped their benefits package that's very competitive, because this comes up frequently when people are wanting to apply for this company. I'm thinking, wow, they really offer a lot. And, the larger companies have typically always had great benefits packages and what have you. So it's kind of hard to say but like I said, the smaller ones have done and still do very well.
Yeah, nice. They both have their benefits, I guess, and it depends on the applicant, what you're looking for, what you're used to. How about in your opinion, what's the best way for propane companies to identify and recruit great candidates, whether it's drivers, techs, or managers?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think one of the best ways is word of mouth. Everybody knows somebody within your respective community that's working for this particular company. So get your employees involved. They may know somebody else that's working over at the beverage company or FedEx or somebody like that wants something that may be a little different, that offers the kind of challenges that our industry has from a positive standpoint. So I think word of mouth is probably one of the most effective ways and getting involved with community events, that, uh, and open houses. It's not like something that you're going to be doing once a month, but, once a year, and I know a lot of companies that do this, and it brings people out. So those things, I think, can certainly broaden that opening to bring in people that you would normally not, that you would do a typical advertisement, whether it's on the big job boards or what have you.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think companies should prioritize hiring from within the industry, or is it better to look at people from outside industries with transferable skills?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I mean, like I said earlier, that, you know, there's always a tendency, and I understand, especially, so much has changed, the demands of managing a company. It's enormous, because you've got all these different hats you got all these moving pieces and what have you. So naturally, you want your preference is to find somebody that has all the skills and qualifications and endorsements and licenses and what have you. It's getting harder. So, being from the outside into trade schools in particular, man, I just don't think the industry in total is not tapping into those local training schools, whether it's on the HVAC side or plumbing or appliance equipment repair and maintenance. And there's some companies, they just do a great job saying, yes, oh yeah, we're willing to do the training. Okay. And what we do on our end is we will send respective applicants that do not have, for example, a CDL. We'll send them sample tests with the endorsements, hazmat, tanker, air brakes, what have you. And that's a huge benefit and then, and companies, we send that to the companies as well. So they can, also use that as something that they can utilize. Promoting from within is great, but companies really have to look to the outside. And like I said earlier, hey, we all had to start somewhere. Okay.
Right.
Right.
And And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, how about as far as training and retention? So once a company hires someone, what's the most important thing they can do to see that employee or set that employee up for success?
There's always, and again, you hear from both sides because I'm always dealing with both sides, the respective company, the client, that is, and then the employees, the candidate, the applicant that's applying for a job. And too often there's a lack of involvement from the employer. And I think that, and again, sometimes you think it's common sense, but I understand the demands that they're having to go through, the rigors of managing a full workforce and then having to, spend the next few weeks at minimum with that particular individual. So having like a mentor, that can take that person, take that candidate, that individual, and kind of stick them under their wing. You, rather than just, well, no, I was just thrown out on the bobtail. God rode with me for 2 days, and then it's, frustration starts to set in. And so the more the company can invest in that involvement, that mentoring, and then clear communications and expectations. And the employer wants to ask the employee, what expectations do you have of us as a company? What are you wanting us to help you with? I think that there's this, workforce flexibility that you hear about a lot today, teamwork enhancement, having team meetings, incentive programs that I think have seemed like we always have incentive programs and what have you. And again, I've been out of working for, so I'm sure they're still there, but I think those are kind of key things that can certainly benefit that training and retention aspect. Another thing that, was always a big deal was ride-alongs. Having those ride-alongs in the first couple of weeks of just, it's not watching how the person's driving. No, it's just being with them, and communicating and letting them know that, and getting them excited about the future that they have ahead. So I think that it's an opportunity for an employer to, ask that individual what they want. You know, family get-togethers. Again, it doesn't have to be once a month, once a year, and whatever works. So things like that, I think, are important, and there are so many others that I'm kind of skipping over.
Can I jump in here for 1 second?
Yeah.
Jim, is there a cadence or a calendar or a schedule that you would recommend people to use? So we hired a guy. We went through the whole interview process. We hired a guy. He starts on Monday the 1st, right? What should the next 30-day look like? How frequently should the supervisor or a member of management check in with that person, right? What do you have recommendations or suggestions there?
Not really, but I think just from being a manager myself, but then also listening over the last, almost 20 years of feedback from folks to answer your question, I think that first 30 days is critical. And it maybe doesn't have to always be just the manager or supervisor, what have you, but somebody almost on like a daily basis should be engaged in one shape, form, or another, whether it's on the CRR, customer relations rep, in how they're processing their daily delivery tickets, on the service work orders, really making sure that it's being not just done correctly, getting them engaged. So I think that that first 30 days, really minimum, is critical, that somebody is taking their time with this person where they don't feel like they're, I don't want to say floundering, but that does happen. They're out on their own, whereas they've got a team that's kind of got their back.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Justin, back to you.
There you go. That's a good one. So what role does company culture play in whether people stay in propane long term?
Yeah, that's a good question. Company culture is kind of a obscure thing to define. Every company's got some different culture, their mission statements and all this. business, I think it's, a lot of it is communication and feedback of what, from a cultural standpoint, you've got senior management, for example, working with the larger companies. And it's really important that first line management and middle management knows how to communicate what senior management not just envisions, but is looking for their leadership teams to communicate and get the employees embracing that. And I don't know if I said that right, but it's important. Otherwise, a lot of that stuff just gets ignored. And then first line management gets frustrated at times because maybe they haven't, they think the individual should know the company culture, but has it been conveyed? Has it been communicated in a understandable way that they know benefits them? It's not just about the company. It's about how that employee feels being part of the culture.
Yeah, fine. Good one. Good answer, man. All right. So this segment I have is for the future of industry recruiting. So I don't know if you have a crystal ball or use a magic 8-ball. So here we go. How do you see the hiring needs in propane evolving over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So this is I think, probably one of the best and most crucial questions, or it's not a question. It's not necessarily a dilemma, but it's something that we're not putting enough emphasis in. And whether it's being, NPGA, PERC, more involved from a media communication standpoint. I don't know. I think they could be more involved in that aspect. But also I don't know how many state associations there are, probably at least 20, because some of the state associations do multiple states. But getting with your local state association, and getting them really not just involved, but engaged. It's like crunch time. It's not getting easier. It's getting harder. Okay. And so outreach to these trade schools, again, I mean, anything we can do to elevate and promote. We just have not done that good of a job. And it doesn't just fall on one particular company or association or entity or whatever. It's a collective, collaborative. But I think that, with NPGA and PERC and their muscle and their expertise, I think, and then you tap into the local associations, I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of benefit that can come out of that. And then again, the social media outlets, that's not my bag. I'm not a social media person. Okay. But that's okay. There's a lot of them that can also help benefit in this area. So those things there, I think, are critical, Justin, to our future. Like I said, it's not getting any easier.
Yeah. Yeah. It does seem like it's just getting harder and harder. As the years went on, it was just it's more difficult to find drivers and to keep people in the industry and even want to do it. Once you do it, it's addicting though. We all know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
How about with younger generations entering the workforce? What could propane companies do to make the industry attractive as a career path?
Well, I guess, one of the things that I guess go back to is, that kind of word of mouth. If you've got some younger folks on your team, if they can you can have some incentive programs that where we used to have, and they worked well. You bring somebody on board that's a local neighbor that has all the goods, i.e. the CDL, the hazmat tank or what have you, but he's working for another, not necessarily another propane company. I've never been one to be poaching on, I would rather look kind of to the outside that can give them that training that is not a steep curve. It's really not. If they already have the driving skills and what have you, and show that individual some of the cool things about our industry. We really also promoting the younger generation. They're pretty savvy. They're pretty sharp. when it comes to social issues, if you will, and promoting that clean, what we used to call clean air, or the auto gas segment. Gosh, there's just so much. I mean, just the broad spectrum of what the propane industry does to contribute to, whether it's agriculture, commercial, industrial, the auto gas side. It's just, there's so much there, but it doesn't really get communicated to the younger generation unless somebody can point that out, I guess.
Yep. Very well said. All right,
Yeah,
Jim,
that's
well, let's
actually
start
part of
here.
the reason. Oh, sorry,
Right.
Justin, but that's actually part of the reason why we're doing these videos, right? To make sure that
Yeah.
people are aware of the different options that are out there. Like you, for example, there are probably people that don't know that there's a resource that's available to them that has industry experience that can help guide somebody or a company through this hiring process. Sorry,
No,
Justin, back to you.
no, it's actually back to you. So game of ping pong.
Oh, is it up to me? Okay. So I want to follow up on one of the questions that Justin just asked in a little bit of a different way. The younger kids today are way more technologically driven than we are, right? So how have you seen that change in the hiring over the last 5 or 10 years?
Well, unfortunately, it's getting back to it's getting harder, and so much of the younger generation uses one device as their tool, and that's their cell phone. Okay, and that doesn't always help make the process easier, or in fact, it made it sometimes harder because the younger generation is using their cell phone for everything. And they, just like anybody else, they're getting bombarded from, all this other social media type stuff. And it makes that portion not that much easier. So I don't know if that's such a good answer, but there's outreaches that social media, that I'm not a social media guy, so I just don't have any kind of suggestions on that. But I guess, the younger generation, it's something that they really rely on, but it's also very easy for them to see something and then just delete it or whatever the heck, they'll do
Right.
when we've missed out. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, it does. I get where you're coming from on that. So if you were advising a propane owner who's struggling to find people, what's the first thing that you would tell them to change in their approach?
I would, well, first of all, ask them what exactly they've been doing in the past. Okay. What's not working, and we get these kind of questions all the time, and we're always willing to help out if they want to utilize our service. I think one of the things that I do is we'll send them out these hiring tips, okay, that can be beneficial because, if especially it's a smaller company and gosh, they haven't hired anybody for, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. They don't really know the rigors of, what good questions there are to ask and what questions not to ask, which I have a list of questions that you're just not supposed to ask, just from the legal standpoint. But I guess if you have getting one of your employees, getting that word of mouth out, is always beneficial. Of course, these days you got the big boards out there that dominate, not just this industry, but every industry. And the only complaints we get there is it's not, hey, but it's you just getting people applying from anywhere and with everything. And that's can be an overwhelming process. But I think, kind of getting back to getting some of your own employees to help with that process. And hey, there's always that little diamond in the rough that somebody knows, somebody that can certainly get them through the door and, sell them on the benefits and the opportunity, the growth opportunity that, with the smaller companies, they may not have a lot of, quote, growth opportunity, but they've got that kind of that home spirit that they're well recognized within the community, that I think is always a huge benefit. So there's all kinds of stuff that companies can exercise.
Yeah, I think your point about employee involvement, employee telling a story is pretty powerful. The second kind of follow piece is this came up in a video that we did a few weeks ago, the fact that propane and drivers are not easily replaceable. If you think about the technological marvels that we're going through now with AI, Microsoft's
Yeah.
going to wipe out most of their coding force, right? People that are
Yeah.
dependent on a technology based career field, they may be upended in the next 5 years, but there's nobody to pre trip a truck. There's no computer that pre trips a truck. There's no computer that makes a delivery. There's no computer that does a leak test at a customer location when they said, I smell gas. So making sure that people understand that this career field is not going away, and it may change. Technology is going to streamline back offices or maybe eliminating some financial positions, but the actual career field of propane is not going away, and making sure that your employees are able to talk about what they do today and how that's going to need to be continued into the future for prospective candidates. I think that's a huge win if we can get everybody talking about that across the industry.
Could not agree more. You said that perfectly because, I've heard, a family member, say something, well, what are you going to do about AI and this and that? And I'm thinking everything that you just said it's not going to get replaced by some kind of robotic intelligence that hey, they still got to get in that truck, they still got to make that delivery, still got to do the leak checks, and they still have to meet that customer eyeball to eyeball, and none of that can be replaced with any kind of robotic artificial intelligence technology. Yeah, they may come up, with something else, but not that.
Right. I agree. I think that's one of the things that as an industry we have to do a better job of pushing. So
Yeah.
the last question
Yeah.
that we kind of have already structured is, what makes you most proud about what LP Gas Jobs has been able to do for the propane industry?
Well, that's a good question. It's been, almost 20 years now. And
by the way, it's okay to brag on yourself a little bit.
Well, it's
Nobody else is
just
going to do it for you.
the people that I've met over the last 20 years has just been a real blessing. And there's so many, call them friends. I mean, you and I've talked a few times, Brian,
Yep.
Justin, and it's a small industry. Okay. We're a small, tight knit industry, and we really look after each other, whether we're competitors or not. They do such a good job of coming to the defense of a local competitor, what have you, when something else happens so our industry is full of quality people. And I've been blessed to be part of helping folks, say, transition from, say, one position to another or one company to another, and getting feedback that says, hey, appreciate your help. So that's probably what it is, Brian.
So listen, I'm going to brag on you a little bit since you won't do it for yourself. I can tell you that we have customers in large swaths of the country. Many of them use your services. Many of them have been extremely pleased with how you've treated them and the results that they've gotten. Now, I'll speak personally. With the company that I was with previously, you were always able to find solutions for us where we struggled to find those individuals. And a company like yours is so needed in the industry that we just appreciate that. And we really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you today to talk about some of these things that affect the hiring and the recruiting and the transition process for the industry. So do you have anything else that you would like to address or any topics for today?
No, not really, other than just thank you for reaching out. I was a little reluctant at first, and it's like, I'm not a really great talker and what have you, but thank you. Thank you for reaching out and inviting me on this program, because the industry has meant a lot to me, and I wouldn't be where I am today had it not been for companies all across the nation that have supported us. And I, from the bottom of my heart, thank each and every one of them. And thank you, Brian and Justin, for inviting me into this program.
It was our
Well,
pleasure.
you're welcome, Jim. Justin, Jackie, anything else for Jim?
No,
Nope.
I'll tell you, Jim, it was my pleasure to have you on here and listen to you. I've dealt with you for 20 years, probably when you started. I don't even know when you started, but I know throughout my career, and you're always there. I'd always get good candidate, and it was always the go-to. So appreciate your help and then talking to you. Sometimes just call and we talk about other stuff, but so I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate all those kind words.
So we're going to make sure that we link your website in the video series so that if people have a question or like your tips and tricks, are those posted on your website somewhere? So if somebody
Yeah,
needed,
I can link up anything. I have my web person do that.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, because if we will share the link to the website. If you've got those on your website where people can, if they're interested, they go take a look and download, maybe reach out and give you a call.
Yeah.
The way this will work kind of going forward is we will edit this. We'll
Hmm.
edit out some smaller clips that we'll put on social media. Then we'll have the entire edited video on YouTube. We will send everything to you before we start publishing stuff. We want to get this out in the newsletter this month. So we'll get this
Hmm.
thing cleaned up and get it sent to you for approval. And again, we just really appreciate you making time. I know 3 hours time difference is sometimes a bit of a challenge, but appreciate everything you do for us as an industry.
Well, thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing back from you. And again, appreciate the call.